All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the discussion session for Tuesday, November 22nd, just before Thanksgiving. So thank you all for coming in on a short week. We have actually a very good discussion session this evening. What we will begin, as always, with Manager McGill's review of items.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight's regular agenda, we have the consideration of an ordinance amending the 2022 budget for revenue and expenditures not anticipated in the 2022 budget. Public hearing on that at the last meeting. We have the introduction of an ordinance establishing compensation for employees for 2023. We have the consideration of a resolution implementing a required real estate property tax waiver. I'm going to read what it says, and you'll hear it again during since it's a little new. Act 57 of 2022 amended the local tax collection law to require taxing jurisdictions that impose real property taxes to adopt a resolution or ordinance within 90 days of the effective date of the act, or not later than January 1st, 2023, directing the tax collector to waive additional charges for real estate taxes in certain situations. The primary situation is if a new property owner does not receive a tax bill in the first year after purchasing the property. The tax at face is not waived, just the penalties. We also have the consideration of the adoption of a complete streets policy. We've talked about that several times here in discussion session before. And then finally, consideration of an appointment to the hospital authority.
Fantastic. All right, thank you. Next up, we have a comprehensive plan update, which I'm looking forward to. Patrick is here to join us this evening. Thank you for being here. How are you all this evening?
Hi. Good evening, everybody. My name is Elaine Kramer, Green Massiatra from WSP. How are you? Good. How are you? Good. Congratulations. Thank you. Get my readers.
All right. Thank you, commissioners, for giving us the opportunity to present tonight. So we are here to give an update on the Ascend Lebo project. This was very similar to the update that was given to the planning board at their meeting last week. So if anyone had tuned into that meeting, there will be some similarities, but we're open to answering any questions. So the project as a whole has three main phases: the explore phase, the test phase, and the build phase. So we are kind of wrapping up the explore phase here towards the end of the calendar year. So I will pass it off to Elaine and Green to kind of talk about some of the things that we've learned through that process.
Thanks, Ian, and thank you to the commissioners for welcoming us here tonight. We're excited, as always, to get to chat with you and to bring up to date on what we feel we've learned so far. Part of the purpose of our check-in is to ask you if this jives with what you think you understand about the community as well. Okay, so just to quickly review our timeline, as Ian said, we're pivoting now from the exploration phase, which is the time where we hear what's on the minds of people in the community, to the test phase, which is where we start to think about, have we gotten it right? Have we heard from a wide variety of people and heard myriad interests from interest groups? Have we heard from majority and minority opinions? And then we will move in the spring to the build phase, which is where we become very solutions oriented and begin to devise recommendations. We are absolutely on track on our timeline, I'm pleased to say. So my part of this presentation is to recap the activities that we've undertaken so far. What I want to say as a preface to this is, as we look at what we've heard from the communities, we think about all the input we've gotten from these activities and from the questionnaire that Breen is going to talk about. But they all are meaningful because they all reach and bring different people to the table in different ways. And so one thing we've seen over time in many communities is that people can interpret a questionnaire as a vote in the community, like a straw vote. And if a majority thinks this, then it's going to happen. So I want to encourage this group to not look at it that way. That's not how we look at it. It is one form of opinion gathering. And it is a good one. It's a valuable one. But you know, it is one way of looking at what people want and what is of interest to people in the community. So to recap our activities quickly, we began on the 4th of July at Community Day using this whiteboard method where we intercepted people as they walked around. I won't read the bullet points, but those are the main things we heard from folks as they stopped by to talk with us. At this point, we're doing the initial survey, and now we're into the second survey, which Breen will talk about in a second. Our second
Sorry, Senator, a spray park is a, you know, like spray.
splash pad,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Great.
I just didn't know what it was. Like,
Yeah.
You're great.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
For little kids.
Oh, yes, it's okay to ask questions.
Yeah.
It's okay to ask clarifying questions. Okay, street trees, what were people saying about that?
So street trees, they like street trees.
Okay,
Yeah.
positive.
So these were questions in the middle of summer. It
Yeah.
was hot outside.
Everybody
Everybody loved the splash pad.
Now they have spray use.
I'm a little chilly for this spray park today.
So they like that we have street trees.
Yes, they think it contributes to community character.
Okay, great.
Just to summarize. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I would say. Then we were at the car cruise, different set of people, you know, at this, we tried to reach different demographics through different methods of outreach. Those were the main things we heard, and our question was, what's important, this question here was, what's your big idea for the community? So it was very
Okay.
open-ended. We weren't steering people in any way. The location can sometimes contribute to it, like you'll see more here about the downtown because or the uptown, because we were right on uptown.
Yeah, sure.
Anything else on that one? Okay, this was interesting. We tried really hard to get students to talk to us. And
Oh,
we never got as many as we wanted, but we did hear a lot of, you know, you can see what we mainly heard, but we did get kids to fill in. We were giving out candy if they gave us their opinion. So we asked, what do you love about the community, or what would you like to change about the community? And again, we don't steer, we just ask the question and people say what they want. So this is what we heard there, and we got really good help from Ian and his kids on this. They were intercepting absolutely, you know, buttonhole. Yeah.
We also heard there's someone else who was helping out that night, although then the crowd found out he was from.
Oh gosh,
That really killed the whole thing.
I thought he was going to be up in the stands with those high ski kids. Or okay,
so sidewalk, another clarifying question. What are they saying about sidewalks? Do they like the sidewalks?
they want more sidewalks.
Okay.
Sidewalks. We heard that over and over again. Sidewalks.
I was like, the number one
The
thing
best.
that kids were saying.
Kids were saying that and parents were saying that. You know, the kids, these are, you know, kids that walk to school, and they were speaking about crosswalks, other features of walking infrastructure, but just yeah.
Not to jump too far ahead and spoil the fun of the rest of the presentation. That was something really consistent we heard in the first survey, where we asked basically the two questions of, like Elaine just said, what do you like most about the community and what would you like to see change? We had over 900 responses to that survey. And one of the most common ones that came up in the what do you like most was walkability. But then at the same time, sometimes it was the same respondents, because I went through all the responses, said, I love the walkability, but I wish there were more sidewalks. So I think this reflects that people like being able to walk places and wish that our network was even more expansive than it currently is.
True. The next event that we attended was the artist market, and Jenny Easton, the project manager for this effort, was the person handling that, and she didn't stay long, to be honest. There weren't many people there, and our time was better spent at an event where we would, you know, just be able to talk to more people. But again, walking rounds. Wow. Halloween. That place was slammed. We ran out of candy and Jenny was trying to do it by herself and she called and said, I need more candy. So I gave her my Halloween candy. I have to say, that's the truth. And we ran out of that too. But there was a huge crowd. This was one where we got more people who had not heard of the survey. So there was something different about this group than the other community events where everybody, people were starting to wave us off. I already did it. I already did it. I already did it. But this one, we were giving away cards, about asking people to complete the questionnaire. And they were like, what's this about? So that was good. We really liked that.
Then again, clarifying question, sidewalk connections. What does that
Yes, that means like sidewalks that take you from where you're leaving from to a destination
mean? Okay.
that effectively transport you where you want to go
Right.
Whole connection.
without
No
a
breaks,
gap.
no breaks, because
No
right now
breaks,
there's too
without a
many
gap.
places where sidewalk ends.
Yeah, or,
Well, or even like the sidewalks that go between yards,
That's what I was wondering.
there's one in your ward on Duquesne that's got a sidewalk that goes down. Those are great for kids walking to school. Sorry.
Yeah,
No.
I'm talking about the
You
cut
can-
throughs, because I love the cut throughs, but.
you know about stuff.
I do.
In addition to the events, we've mounted other efforts to engage people, and this is a list of the stakeholders, the key stakeholders. Of course, we've spoken with each of you, and thank you again for your time on that, commissioners. You can see, to be honest, I have not yet reached the Asbury Health Services CEO, so pretend like that's not on there, because that's not true. But we have talked to all the others on here. The additional individuals TBD are probably later in the effort when we get more solutions oriented and we are to the point where we need specialists to weigh in or, say, what about this versus this? That's when we'll reach out to more people. But at this point, we're kind of, drawing a line and saying we've done a first pass. And youth engagement that you can see over there.
A meeting with our junior board members to talk about engagement strategies for comp plan stuff. And another thing I'll mention too was in addition to these key community stakeholders that had one-on-one interviews with the PASHA consultants, I also had sent email blasts out to all of our schools, churches, some key business owners, some other just key community folks. Some of the same people that were listed here, basically just kind of giving them a little blurb on the Ascend Lebo, we're doing this, we're doing a comprehensive plan update. We've launched this ascendlebo.com website to collect community feedback. If you're interested in basically copy pasting this 2 sentences into any newsletters or anything you have, feel free to use this. So we've done other outreach to groups throughout the communities, schools, churches, PTAs, other groups, beyond. These were kind of just one-on-one sit down.
Well, there has been someone who's shown up in commission, open microphone right now 4 times, 5 times with questions, concerns. I don't know if you've reached out to him or not, but when you're looking for someone to perhaps give, my sense of his comments, he's not necessarily in favor of what's happening. It's important to get his feedback. He may even be at the microphone tonight, but I would urge people to please listen to what he has to say,
Absolutely.
to add that to the perspective. If
Very good point. And in fact, I believe, Ian, that you've told us at our meetings of some of the people that have spoken up. And so, we'll follow your suggestion on following up with this.
One of the folks that came to the meeting to speak up with, I had a 2-hour one-on-one meeting with. So
Wow, okay, thank you.
actually, it was not one-on-one. Greg was with me too. So
Okay,
it was the planning department met with one of the.
there you go. All right, good.
Thank you.
So we'd absolutely, as you all, we're happy to absolutely happy. to do so. We've had the first of 3 meetings with what it's kind of a cumbersome name, but the advisory and partner group liaisons. So each of the advisory groups in the municipality has named a liaison for to the comp plan process, and as have the partner groups such as the partnership, the Nature Conservancy Outreach, and some others that I'm probably overlooking. But-
School district, St. Clair Health, yeah, a couple others.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So there will be 3 meetings with them. The first one was to make sure people understood what a comprehensive plan was and to begin to ask what their boards or groups think are priorities. And that will become, later there'll be, a chance to bounce off some recommendations off of them. Potential recommendations. I do respectfully ask the commission members, when you are sitting in on your boards, can you please remind them that they're the liaisons for a reason, and they're supposed to be reporting back to the boards the way Ian keeps this group informed. So
Right.
what we don't want is for the end of the process, people to say, how come we didn't know about this, or nobody told us? Because this is the structure that is supposed to be in place to help the boards stay involved in this. So,
I will just say that the ESP has already had a readout. So that is working.
Good.
And I want to make sure that the ESP prepared a whole kind of baseline new climate action plan that I asked them to shift and be prepared to give it to you guys. It is a whole set of recommendations that ultimately could turn into a climate action plan. But I told them, since comp plan is happening, prepare the documents, so that should get sent over to you guys.
thank you.
Yeah, your representative did mention the comp plan work,
Sorry.
Right.
cap. The climate action plan work in our breakout group for that, and glad to hear that he reported back.
Were you able to be out on election day?
So we chose not to, and let me explain why. We discussed your request and recommendation that we do so. Because of the undercurrents that we had heard from a few members of the community at the public meetings, that they thought that it was politicized somehow. We were afraid that being out on election day would make it seem political when it isn't. So thank you for this suggestion. I want to explain why we respectfully made that decision.
That's okay. I was out on election day, as I am, just, kind of walking complaint department. I literally heard nothing about comp plan, on a good, bad, Zippo. And I don't know if that meant people were happy or just had not reached whatever the message to comment, but it was just interesting that somehow was not on people's radar. I don't know if that's good or bad, but just throwing it out there. You think you've reached so many people, and it was just nothing. I heard about groundhogs. But I didn't hear about the comp plan, so somehow it did, with that, take that as a subset of Lebanon. There's no comment on it at all. Yeah,
Interesting,
Yeah.
puzzling.
And I would say that could partially be because we're still early in the process and we're still kind of collecting ideas. We haven't really thrown out a lot of ideas of here's what we're thinking about doing yet. That I'm sure once we do that part in the test phase of the project, which we're starting to get into now, we'll start to hear a lot more feedback. But since both surveys right now are pretty open-ended and, mostly tell us what you think. We're collecting ideas right now. We're in the explore and discover phase that may have just hypothesizing.
Yeah.
And so now I'm gonna turn it over to Green, who's again going to speak about the results that so far of the community questionnaire. We do know that once you get about this many, you don't have a lot of change after, in the
When's it
grand,
closing or when's it?
I thought it was gonna close at the end of November, but I
Yeah.
think it's still open.
Yeah, we were targeting the end of November.
Okay, so anytime.
So, the last 40 that trickle in.
Yeah.
Don't change the overarching theme or whatever, themes and gut direction and main points that come up. Is, generally speaking. So, yeah, thanks, Bree.
Yep, thank you. So this is really a continuation of what Elaine has already talked about in the sense that we gathered a lot of input in person, now we're gathering a lot of input online. And all of that combined together, you know, is where we are looking for trends. So another way that we collected input, one of the ways we did so online was through this interactive map, which is
People love.
really, it's really fun to do. You know, you can be really specific or really general. And there are 6 different types of input that you could provide. Different points that you could put down. You can add comments. People can respond to your suggestion, which is also helpful in seeing some of the, you know, debate about different ideas, right? Different points of view on the same concept. Overall, we have 830 responses on this map. And with the surprise to everyone, I'm sure, walking came in with the largest sort of number. That was the point that was used most often. That can mean a whole range of things in terms of this map, the specific comments we have documented, but it does give you the sense that there are trends. There's a strong trend toward walking as an issue. There were, as Ian referenced earlier, there were there have been 2 community surveys. The initial, very simple, allowing us to gather every kind of idea out there, seeing some trends there, then able to ask some more nuanced questions about those ideas that came out of the survey. So the current survey, again, more specific, more nuanced, allowing us to explore some of those initial ideas. And all of this is really drilling down on what is the most important and where should we be focusing when we're looking for solutions and recommendations to make for how the municipality can focus its energy over the next 10 years. Again, the 2 surveys, this shows the reach, gives you a sense of how many folks have participated, and this is really great participation, and their makeup. So lots of residents.
Can you put this number into context? Right, so I know 1,645 and 35,000 residents.
Mhm.
How does that compare to other times you've done this? Just so we have a sense of.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's good.
Good as in
The last,
twice as much as usual.
1,000 is good.
the 2013 comprehensive plan that we did had 310 responses on the survey. The communication study we did in 2019 that we mailed to every household in the community had about 3,400 responses. So, and half of those were papers that were mailed back to us. Half of those were ones that were done online. The Parks Master Plan was fewer than this. The Parks Plan, we did multiple surveys for that. I don't remember what the end numbers were for each survey. But I think in total in the Parks Plan, we had about 3,000 points of input between the 3 surveys. And with this, we've got, you know, close to 2,600 on the screen right there, plus 800 some on the map, plus all the people that we've talked to throughout the process. You know, we're well over 3,000 points of input already into this process. And we're still very early in the first phase of a 3-phase project. So this is very encouraging. And there's some other things that I don't want to steal Breen's thunder, but there's some other things I offer.
Well, I mean, is there, I mean, generally speaking, I mean, throughout a whole comp plan process, right? I'm not saying just Mount Lebanon, I'm saying more broadly. Is there a percent of population that you'd like to say has contributed? Or more importantly, is there a percent of population that you say that's generally where we see a result?
I think 10% is pretty typical.
And I will say, I think you don't need 10% to be, once you get to a certain scale, you don't need 10% to be like
Statistically significant.
Yeah, right. So by way of example, because I've done more of this than I have comp plan surveys specifically thus far, is when I was at PRT and we would do a rider survey, we were looking for 2,000 responses, and that's across the county, right? So 2,000 out of potential 1.3 million person rider base would be acceptable, which makes this extremely impressive. Happy. So this gives you some more information about who responded. You can see we're doing very well in terms of geographic diversity across the community, but have some work to do in terms of reaching younger and older audiences. Although I anticipate Ian's comment that we've got more older residents participating in this than in past surveys. But we still, I think, have some aspirational goals in terms of getting a little bit more representation at the outside ends of that particular spectrum.
How do we push that maybe through teachers or something in this last week of the survey?
I would say, so one of the things that we talked a lot about when we met with the student groups too, was that when we ask kind of open-ended questions of teenagers of like, where do you want your community to go? They kind of have a hard time grasping that. And one of the suggestions that our junior commissioners, junior board members had was that, you know, when we get into kind of the test and the build phase, their teenager brains are better suited to kind of analyze, like, is this a good idea? Yes or no, versus like the aspirational exercise of where do you want your community to be in 10 years? So as we get into the next kind of phases of the project, we have some ideas for how to engage that group with those things. But kind of the aspirational portion of the exercise, they didn't wrap their heads around as much. The one thing I will say to echo Breen's comment, when we did the Parks Master Plan last year, across the 3 surveys, we were pretty consistent in the 65 and older demographic of being like 8 to 9% of the total responses were from that group. In both of these surveys so far, it's been like 20 to 23%, which is right around where our census demographic is of like 22% of our total population is 65 and older. So I feel like we've done a very good job that the amount of 65 and older population we've gotten to respond kind of matches statistically with our census demographics. We've gotten a lot of very useful comments.
I just have to shout out to Board 5.
We're winning.
Population is by percentage of population.
Well, I'm gonna
So
take credit for the over 65.
I was surprised. Which one? The older demographics usually is weighted more that way. Interesting. It's true.
And this would go up the cost of services and taxes.
While we have folks taking credit, we'd also like to give credit to the communications team for being really strong and supportive on getting the word out about this. You know, to your point, Ian, I think when about the young folks of when Elaine was saying, you know, we gave them candy if they gave us their opinion, I was thinking you'd have to give me candy to not give my opinion. To a certain sort of like level of investment in the community, you know, you have opinions, and they just haven't, you know, they don't have enough context yet. So getting into some of the questions from the current survey, this gives you a sense of how folks respond. So what should be a high priority? And I think we asked folks select 3 from this list. And congratulations, the top issue is the one that you've already addressed. So that's a win-win. You've got your Parks Master Plan, and working toward implementing that is you're already working on. So folks are going to be thrilled with that over the next 10 years.
I don't think they want a plan though. I don't think that's what they were saying.
Plan gave us 180
They want
recommendations.
us to implement it. Yeah, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
But I think this reinforces that they want us, you know, we did the plan, so now people are behind the implementation of it.
Okay,
Sure.
exactly. Okay, good. Thanks.
And we'll of course, you know, keep our eye out if things come up on those issues that are not somehow covered in the 100 recommendations.
Or if you
But-
can help us prioritize it, because, you know, it's kind of a lot. So like the, you know, more specifically what that means at some point would be really helpful.
Lots of comments. Yeah, Ian has read every one of them.
Awesome.
So also in the sort of the top tier here are safe streets for active transportation users, the strength of the business district, and the cost of services. So we have comments that can help break that down for us, but, we're seeing again, the continued trend of walking and safety, for walking, which is just going to continue as we go through these questions.
And the cost of services, people want those to be considered, or they want them to decrease or increase.
I think, you get a lot of comments about taxes, but a lot of those go to school district taxes because they're so much higher than municipal taxes. But I think generally speaking, just being cognizant of what the costs of services are, is the broader picture.
Right, value.
Yes.
I think the
Yeah.
value of
Yeah.
spending.
Yeah. Because people appreciate a lot of the services that we
That's right.
provide and are willing to
That's
pay for them too. So, yeah.
Commissioner Grella, you were gonna say something?
Just saying, I'm curious how these compare to some responses. I think Ian mentioned we had about 300 responses from the 13 comp plan. And I know just reading the 13 comp plan, we've got things like rec and streets, walkability, things like that, business districts obviously in there. I don't remember specifically costs of services coming, although to Mindy's point, that's probably always a comment. We talk about diversity in general, but I think DEI or DEIB is kind of a new concept since 2013, at least in the way we talk about it. Just curious how these might compare to what's made it into the 13 plan.
I would say overall, it's very similar. And spoiler alert, we do have a few slides coming up with comparisons to 2013 data versus this year's stuff. So we'll get to that shortly.
Craig, does the audio sound okay to you?
It does.
Okay, great.
So digging in to more of the questions from the current survey, we asked, and these are, we're showing.
She's celebrating. Sorry, she's celebrating. The most important one.
No more tear downs. Okay.
Yeah, so
Didn't mean it.
I think most of this group has heard me say this before in the public comment portion of meetings, but these concepts were basically written sort of specifically to test ideas on this scale of, how much folks agreed or disagreed with them. As Elaine led off with tonight, this was not a popular vote on whether we were going to do something or not. It was just, how receptive is the community to some of these ideas? And all of these questions came from things that we heard either in the initial survey or in our meetings with boards and authorities or community stakeholders or things like that. So these weren't things that just got dreamed up on the side. Somebody said this at some point in the process, and most of the time it was many people said this, and it was rising to the point of like, let's see how the broader community feels about the things that we're hearing as consistent themes from multiple points of view.
Awesome.
Using that, we're able to figure out the questions.
I'm saying, say again, Commissioner Grella?
I'm saying it's amazing that 1,000 or more people were able to figure out these really tough questions.
So no, your audio is cutting in and out, so it's tough to hear your comment.
I'll put it in the chat. We don't have a chat. Let me check. Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
I was being sarcastic. I was saying it's amazing that 1,000 or more people figured out these really hard to understand questions.
As I skim through these, I would love to see these as percentages or a pie. You can send it separately. They would be nice to actually understand. This doesn't.
And keep thinking about what more you want in terms to review in terms of the data, because this is your data.
Okay.
So.
The spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Excel, right?
Yeah, we've actually been talking about how once the surveys close down, how we're going to visually show the data, because now that we have the ascendlebo.com website set up, we're going to use that as kind of a clearinghouse for everything. So once the surveys close, we're going to put data on the website so you can check back and see how folks responded to these
This is
things.
the way architects like to see it. The rest of us like the numbers.
Yeah.
Right.
So yes, there will be, this data will be made publicly available probably during December, early January, somewhere in that.
But this is a great visual, you know.
Yeah.
Good.
So as Ian said, the phrase, the concepts in italics are the ones that we're testing, and we're gonna go through them in terms of how strongly people, from most positive reactions to least positive reactions. So the one that got the most agrees was future development or redevelopment should respect Mount Lebanon's historic architectural character, and Anne is very excited. So the second most positive responses was, as a community, Mount Lebanon has a responsibility to take actions within its control to address climate mitigation and like such as things that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So great, and that is something that is being actively worked on by the Environmental Sustainability Board. Next most popular, offer a diverse range of housing options, people at all stages of their lives. So taking into consideration that someone might not want to or be able to stay in a single family home when they get to a certain age, they may be on income at a certain point. And so how do you provide the different types and price points of housing to, allow people to stay in the community?
Did we get a sense for what stage of life specifically people were asking for?
We got a lot of comments in the first survey about a lack of housing for seniors.
Seniors.
That there was, and that's kind of what led to this question being in the second survey. So I'll say there were two parts. Two parts, 2 points of entry. One was the seniors that we saw a lot of comments on, and then others were related to kind of the diversity, equity, and inclusion category of people wanting more diverse housing stock to potentially attract diverse residents. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, interesting.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of requests for senior housing as a commissioner.
Next is every home should be within a 20-minute walk, bike, or transit ride of daily destinations, such as grocery stores, parks, schools. Then we have Mount Lebanon being the standard bearer among local communities sustainability, innovation, progress toward ecological integrity and resilience. So being a leader among its peers, or continuing to be a leader among its peers. Next is people of all income levels should be able to find a place to live in Mount Lebanon. Nearing the end here, Mount Lebanon needs a dog park.
Now is that, no, not quite 50-50. It looks like.
That's good.
A little less. You consider there's 1,600 some responses,
I
so
want to know. Okay.
yeah.
A lot of people in the middle on that one.
Yeah, the answer is neutral, don't know.
Yeah, and that was kind of, we intentionally used the word need in this question because we wanted to really test like if it was a true need or if it was just a want, like is it a nice to have or is it a we must have? So that was kind of why we used the word need rather than like, it would be nice to have a dog park, because if you say that a lot, people say, yeah, it would be nice, but the word
Wanna pay
need,
for it. Yeah.
right, the word need elicits some more thinking
Right.
behind it.
And the next one is, but reconfiguring our streets to increase safety and comfort for cyclists is important, even if it requires the conversion of some streets to one-way traffic.
So
This is where I'd be curious to see, because I'm looking at 535, agree or strongly disagree. There's going to be strong agree. But how many disagree strongly? Almost, if not a tie, it seems something or close.
Looks like most say no if you take out the neutrals.
Yeah, that's kind of just on the eyeball test. It looks like it's mostly no.
right.
And
Yeah,
then-
you're at about 33% of total responses with this one, saying you agree on this.
And then again, is a very specific scenario, testing really saying, if this sort of had maximum inconvenience, would you still think it was a good idea?
Yeah. That's fair.
And last but not least, or maybe last because it's least, any redevelopment of a residential site in Mount Lebanon should result in an equal or greater number of housing units than were there previously. Another very specific testing question.
And this one kind of came from the planning board because they had expressed some, and some of the historic preservation board too, expressing some concerns about tear downs of buildings and losing housing stock in the community. But I think that people, when they took the survey, took it, answered this question more with the perspective on, increasing density in
Yeah.
residential areas rather than thinking about losing housing stock. So,
Right,
And another one that came out was seemingly for no's and yeses.
yes.
yeah, that would definitely did.
That's how I would have interpreted it.
That was probably closer to 25% on the agree side.
Mhm.
And that is, as Ian has pointed out before, tricky because it can't be more dense if the zoning doesn't allow it to be more dense. So that isn't necessarily an outcome here, even though one might infer that from the, so it's just then it becomes a level of complexity that not every citizen is familiar with.
That also gives us an opportunity to potentially ask questions in different ways moving forward in future, feedback loops.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I would say that from this response, it's probably clear to interpret that residents are saying they don't want to increase density. They're not necessarily.
Possibly, we'll probably get more into that in the next phases of the project too. So I
Here, I
think,
got the same conclusion. It looks that way.
I think it depends on where. I think you're jumping to conclusions. I mean, for those of us that are looking to senior housing at some point, it's gonna have to be.
Yeah.
dense. It has to be one floor. It's,
Yeah.
I don't want to mow lawn. I don't do it now. Still doesn't. She wasn't my neighbor. So,
Right, we have some additional, more specific questions here on our most
yeah.
most referenced topic. How would you describe the quality of your walking environment? So we have, good was the most popular, people leaning in the positive direction, but definitely some folks out there with not as positive opinion. How important will it be during the next 10 years to close gaps in sidewalk network? So only 16% of folks say that it's not important. And the largest respondent is extremely. Here we have some info about so the difference across responses from the 2013 survey to the 2022 survey. And you can see that there are a lot of similarities.
family friendly and walkability has kind of grown in importance. And yeah, and these were kind of the top 5 responses, but we also have it broken down by percentages too. And we'll start publishing that information once things, wrap up on the surveys, just to kind of see, this was a question that we just copy pasted from the last comp plan. So we wanted to have an apples to apples
Sure.
comparison.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah, yeah.
interesting. So yeah, I think there was a lot of similarities here.
In the last comp plan, when people say public services, do you have a guess on what they are getting at there?
We could ask the planner from that.
That's
comp.
right.
I think public services really referred to the range of services the municipality provides, whether it was leaf collection, snow removal, emergency
Please.
response.
Okay.
It was just a
Mhm.
a broad umbrella of the services.
I'm loving this conversation, but I just want to know the time.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah,
Oh,
and
wow.
these are really, these additional questions are, we can kind of skip ahead and you have them all for reference. So just.
can I talk about one though?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So this was one that I thought was really fascinating about where did you live prior to moving to Mount Lebanon? That kind of saying where are draws coming from. This chart's actually messed up. It should be flipped. Sorry. The different states should be the larger chunk of the pie. Different counties should be the smaller one. But our largest draw is a different community in Allegheny County, followed by a different state at 32%. And then the different Pennsylvania County, and I've always lived in Mount Lebanon, was about equal. So I thought it was really interesting that where our draw is, right? Where are we pulling our new residents from is locally within the county and then nationwide. But not necessarily rest of Pennsylvania. And the lifelong residents weren't as many, although I will say that there was not an option for, I grew up in Mount Lebanon, moved away and then moved back, so I'm not sure what that could have.
Got a lot of them.
Yeah, the boomerangs are not really counted here, but I still thought it was interesting kind of where the draw comes from of where we're popular. And then the other one that we looked into was about how much people are working from home now in kind of the post-COVID world. 35% of respondents saying that they work from home regularly is a pretty big number and something I think we're gonna have to take into consideration as we move forward with how this plan gets devised.
Yeah, and I think, I know you're already reaching out to the real estate community, but I think the real estate community can give some very good insights into just the general question of what are some of the questions your buyers ask you when they're looking to locate
Right.
somewhere? What's important to them? Is it school district? Is it safety? Is it whatever? Because that'll drive a lot of what's shown on that chart.
And it makes the emphasis on business districts and strength that you already have in business districts that much more important when people are around 12 hours a day to utilize them as opposed to just. So just in conclusion, the trends, again, across all of the different sources of input that are rising to the surface, pedestrian connections, park and rec, business districts, sustainability, DEI, thinking about redevelopment, we need to dig into that one a little bit more, and neighborhood impact, as we just discussed. Capitalizing on what makes Mount Lebanon special. And I really enjoyed reading what you had to say about that in your interviews. Anything that we've gone through all of this, was there anything that jumped out at you that you thought was missing?
You mentioned business districts and you mentioned people working from home. I'd be curious from your findings is, I'll say behavior change to say, okay, if you're working uptown, you may go uptown to get something to eat, whereas if you're working at home, you just may eat leftovers at home or something. So even though people are working from home, what's the impact of businesses? What are they, or let's say, if I'd been working from home, I was going to do this, but I go to work, I want that. If there's any kind of information you can tease out of the survey.
Yeah, we'll have to look through them some more. I don't know if we saw a lot specifically geared towards that. So I'm going to answer your question by going off on a complete tangent and say something else.
My question is homework for later.
Yeah,
I wasn't expecting to have the instant answer.
Right. The one thing that I did see, we saw a lot of was people talking about the two business districts, Uptown and Beverly Road. But I think Castle Shannon Boulevard kind of gets forgotten about as our third business district that we actually do have. So something that we were kind of talking about is, what can we recommend within the plan to kind of push that district forward and highlight the fact that we do have a third business district within the community.
And Concord, there's like a fourth, maybe fifth, but yeah, definitely Castle Shannon.
Galleria, which is a
Absolutely.
separate
zone entity, right?
Yeah, that was on my list to highlight to make sure. But when you're ready, what I saw was missing, and I'm not quite sure how to articulate it, but when I drill into residents about why'd you move here and then why do you stay now that your kids are gone? What comes up is the neighborhood connections, their lifelong friends live on their same street. And that has been fostered through block parties, through food trucks now, you're walking the dog and hanging out, chit-chatting while you're taking care of your lawn. And it's really kind of street by street, depending on how pedestrian friendly our streets are, but that's
Sidewalks.
rises to the top, or brick streets that don't even have sidewalks necessarily because it's just less traffic, or that end street cul-de-sacs. So I'm not sure how to capture that piece. We have this secret sauce of real neighborhoods here in Mount Lebanon.
We heard a
And
lot of
even
that in the
the
initial
block
survey.
parties, where you can obviously block off the street, the people say, I'd like to have 6 block parties.
Yes.
It's, even with, you just put up the sawhorses and let's have a party kind of thing.
Yeah, we heard a lot of those kind of comments of the community connectedness, just the sense of community that we have within a lot of our neighborhoods. People like their neighborhoods, people like
My best friends, my family is now the neighbors. That's what people tell me.
the
I can't
historic look and feel and, everything that adds to it, the street trees, the walkability, the architecture of the community, all that stuff kind of works.
Fences open.
So I want to continue to plan and build and zone for improving that and supporting that.
And one place we heard it build on what Ian said is events.
Yeah.
We had a lot of interaction at events and people said, like this.
And they would kind of go like this.
because that brings people together and that is the community, the sense of community as well as the neighborhood, so. I think that was absolutely a thread we've heard, that pedestrian connections is a big part of that. Recreation and parks is a big part of community.
Yes.
The business districts, going someplace together to have a cup of coffee, that is the community. It's really embedded in a lot of these things.
That's how I read what makes Mount Lebanon special. On this slide.
Fantastic.
Any
Great.
surprises? Anything here surprise you?
Well, I think the one slide we skipped over that shows that the last comp plan said 18% said it was less desirable and 26% said it was less desirable this time. Which I thought was very interesting. Something to think about.
And what is?
Yeah.
What's
Okay,
that?
but
Yeah.
yes, but
What is
we'll
that for you?
talk about it now. And I'm just from moving forward, I'm sure you're gonna do this, but I wanted to drill into the top, everything basically that's right into the surface, but specifically like pedestrian connections to what? To what? I put down what business districts, what about Castle Shannon? To, those cut throughs that kids use or everybody uses just to walk through. Parks and rec facilities, what do you mean? You want more? What kind? Or you want to improve the ones we have, expanding programming, et cetera, et cetera.
And I think some of that's where the mapping tool comes in handy, that like people specifically said, here are places where we would
Right.
like more sidewalks.
Yes,
So
They did.
that's
Yeah,
where,
good.
the different layers of
Right.
input that we've received is valuable.
Yeah, that map.
Hey, we've got two time sensitive ones coming up with winter stuff. Maybe we can pick this conversation up on the next discussion.
Yep, we will continue to provide further updates to the commission as the process goes on, and we thank you all for your continued support of the comp plan project.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate all your work.
And on that, I don't know, do we want to reorder the Snow Angel with the ice spot update? Which one's more important if we don't get to vote?
That's up to the commission.
That's what I'm asking here.
I
I
think.
would say that,
Go ahead, Craig.
yeah, I think they're both good, but I would lean towards Snow Angel.
Okay, do you want to make sure we hit Snow Angel first? I don't care. I'm just asking, because I don't know the priority. I don't know if there's any decisions that need to be made
Yeah.
based on this discussion.
No, let's just get.
You want to?
Yeah,
We're moving along.
let's get this done.
I won't ask questions.
This is more just to show the commission prior.
Yeah.
Authorized expenditure of funds to address ice spots. This is an update on the funds that you allocated.
Right.
with that.
It's winter theme too.
Yeah.
Sure, too nice.
Actually seeing something. I usually used to see them in November.
Yeah.
So Josh is here. He's taken charge of this project and actually got a lot of the work done. We were pleased to have contractor on board and be able to attack this project right away. So Josh.
So I'm gonna run through how we got here today, and then a discussion on the process and collaboration up front on the ice spots, and then the process through construction. And then just a summary update on the budget, where we ended up. So we were here back in July, earlier this year, and essentially we presented an overall comprehensive ice spot list and a preliminary budget associated with those ice spots. At that time, there were 80 ice spots, 18 of which are priority ice spots. That discussion session led to the authorization of $329,000 from the unassigned fund to address those spots. That included design and construction. So in the preparation phase, we collaborated with Public Works to identify the top priority icing locations. Those are listed here on this screen. And then initially we coordinated upfront with the contractor to ensure capacity to get the work done this year. Through the collaborations process and budget coordination and taking advantage of some other utility work going on in the municipality. This list I have shown here is the list that was actually constructed. So we addressed the number 1, the number 4, and the number 5 ice spot. Woodhaven Drive was exchanged with Sunny Hill Drive. In order to take advantage of a co-op opportunity, the PA American installing water line along that street. They're out there right now. And then Birch Avenue at Scott Road. Essentially, that one was identified. It was a good project for the remaining budget that was left. Address the other 4.
Sure.
And then just follow up and note, number 2, number 3, and number 6 did not get constructed this year for various reasons. Number 2 has a PennDOT coordination component and existing utilities that we are working through the design phase on to put together a sustainable plan and solution for that project. So design's ongoing. There's some coordination with the landowner, and we will have to coordinate with PennDOT as well. Arrowwood Drive was held this year due to scope of the project.
Why is it so
And-
expensive?
It's new storm sewer. It's
Oh,
new storm. That's the majority of this.
all right, got it.
So a lot of these
Yeah.
are adding storm sewer
Sure.
to be able to tie the homes into.
Wow.
And that's the same with Sunny Hill Drive. That's adding storm sewer. And that includes like inlets,
Yeah.
capture
Oh, yeah,
surface
sure.
runoff,
Yeah.
and
Got it.
all of the meters as well.
Mhm.
So I'll run through the ones we did, just some numbers and just to put it in perspective. Broadmoor Drive, that was the installation of 235 feet of storm sewer. That essentially allowed us to capture 9 roof leaders that were previously discharging onto the roadway. Additionally, 2 inlets were installed as well, and that helps capture the surface runoff before it ran into Richland Road. So Greenhurst Drive, this one captured 2 Ys, essentially 2 roof leaders, and involved the installation of 185 feet of storm sewer. 72 Mount Lebanon Boulevard. This was essentially the capture of 2 roof leaders coming from this residence where we were able to tie it into the storm sewer system that was right there. So to your question earlier about cost, the storm sewer system was here for this one.
Yes.
So this one was significantly cheaper than the
Cheaper,
other.
yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
Woodhaven Drive, this one was the most expensive one, but it was the installation of 335 feet of 24-inch pipe. Allowed us to capture 8 residence wise roof leaders coming into that. So instead of those discharging onto the roadway, they're now directly tied into the storm sewer.
And again, this was a part of this is a phase 2 of another project that we had already completed. It's been on the list for a long time. And with this, we'll share in the paving restoration with the water company, or they're gonna do it all.
They're gonna do all.
Yeah, so we put the storm sewer in, and normally we would have to paver the road like we did on the other side. Because they're doing this, we were able to piggyback on, and they take care of the restoration. So it's safe.
Nice. All right.
And
Once in a while, you get lucky.
Yeah.
That's essentially why this one was swapped out with some of the others. To
Sure.
Advantage of the situation. Birch Avenue with Scott Road, similar to the others, installation of a little over 100 feet of pipe.
Yeah.
Captured 2 additional residents. Roof runoff. This slide is a summary of the numbers. Again, we were authorized on 329,000 to include design and construction. Going through the construction of these 5 projects and the design phase as well, it puts us at 320,000. So we're under budget, but we maximized it as much as we could for projects we have.
Nice.
Other icing updates, this is not a part of the 329,000, but I thought it was worth mentioning. This year, as part of the road reconstruction, we addressed the icing issue at Clemson Drive, and then ahead of the mill and overlay program, we addressed the icing issue at MacArthur Drive as well. So that's just two off the list,
Great.
those ones.
Good.
And that's all I got. So,
Okay.
there's,
Commissioner Grella, I know this is always your favorite topic. Do you have questions?
Hey, I was just trying to find the mute button. No, I think this is a good report. A lot of these ice spots are near schools. Also parks. I think one of them was close to Beedling and the rec center. So these are all good updates. And obviously with winter and snow soon to continue falling upon us, these are, I think, much needed, and these were good expenses for us.
yeah, and I would like to just with the contractor that's on board, they did an excellent job on this project. And Public Works was tremendous help and getting all this coordinated as well. So,
Great work.
yes.
Super fast. We just approved this in like July.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, and I mean, that's the idea, and then we didn't have to go, I mean, everything's local approvals, we didn't need third-party permits and all that other kind
Yeah.
of stuff, so. When you have things in place like this, you can be very efficient, so I think it's a good example.
That's amazing. Great work.
Can we get an updated list? I know we have this somewhere in either Google Drive or SharePoint somewhere, but this might be something for us to consider for allocating a few more dollars for next year.
Yeah.
to support.
I agree.
I'll get that out. I'll
Yeah.
include that as part of the stormwater budget report.
We can do it in stormwater fund though, right? It'll.
Yes.
So we can wait for the money to. go out.
2024, we'll get a
Yeah.
little bump in available funding, but we can obviously put a plan in place
Yeah.
prior to that.
Great.
That sounds good.
We may not have room this year with all the other things that are coming up, but it's good to have that updated list of what the priority ones are in front of us.
Yeah, definitely. Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next up, and we are back on schedule. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. We have Greg Wharton and Laura Lilly to discuss the Snow Angels program.
But I think this was something that we had talked about last year and trying to work towards putting something in place for this year.
Yeah, I think it was Craig's idea, right?
I was gonna say, I think Craig was originally the commissioner who had mentioned it. A couple other commissioners had sort of expressed an interest in moving it forward. So Laura has been working very hard on that along with Greg to try to come up with something to put in.
I would
place.
love to take credit for this, but I cannot. It's all Laura. And before that, I know it was always murky dealing with the school board on this, and the person who was supposedly running this program, I think, retired last year. So, I'm just happy to see it moving forward. I think it's a great idea, and it's definitely something we need.
Correct. And I am going to turn it over to Greg, because even though I started this conversation, Greg is finishing it.
All
So
right.
He's been doing all of the recent work, so.
So as you can tell, in the last couple of weeks, we've gotten a little bit of snow, nothing too non-manageable by the residents. So it's time that we talk about some snow angels. So this is a program really just it's a community-based program, volunteer-based that help assist residents in need that are homebound and seniors. So I think to kind of start us off, I think Laura, being a little bit more familiar than I am with the program, should kind of run down a little bit of the history of it, how we're kind of absorbing that program and kind of running with it. So.
Sure. Originally, the school district sponsored it, and they took both the names of people who needed the service and kids who wanted the service hours, or sometimes it was benevolent. They didn't get credit. They just wanted to help, and they then matched the groups. But in recent years, they become reticent to do that because they are not able to get background checks on the homes where they're sending the kids. So they are no longer doing it for that reason. Now they're still.
Why do you need a background check if you're just gonna be outside?
I don't know what their threshold is. They felt it was a liability to be
Okay.
sending a child into a place where they did not, they don't know somebody's gonna come out and start talking to
Sure.
them. So that's when we started talking to them. I had a conversation with Becca, who is the new
Activities
the
coordinator,
activities coordinator, and they still wanted to give the kids an option, but they weren't going to be in charge of it.
So like Laura was saying, we're pretty much just taking it and running with it here. So it's pretty much, like I mentioned before, it's a volunteer-based program. We're doing the municipality, our role is just matching. We're just basically using our abilities to communicate with the general public, and we're reaching out to build a volunteer base first. Once we understand the volunteers, what capacities they have, their availability, their equipment, how many people they're able to take, because we really don't know how much could necessarily be needed at a time, because if there's 3 on a street and there's a volunteer that is able to do all 3, then that's 1 volunteer that takes 3 houses. But if there's something that's like, we need to also understand like travel to see how many people would be willing to travel, a certain distance to kind of to be able to assist those people. But really all it is making sure our public walkways and our sidewalks are cleared, because again, going back to the walkability we talked about in the comprehensive plan a lot, we're kind of assuring that that's going to be a safe walking around, especially for not only students, but for just residents in general. So
the municipality's role is to do the matching, and then what happens about complaints?
so really we would then match like matching the volunteer and the resident. If there's any type of miscommunication, they can always contact myself. I will, be happy to reiterate another phone call to the volunteer to make sure they're following up. But really most of the scheduling and, any type of certain not requirements, I should say, but certain needs they have are just going to be communicated pretty much. Yeah. But they're just going to be communicated between the resident and the volunteer. It's all we're doing is a matchmaking. So it's pretty much that's.
Yeah, I missed the presentation, but I see the whole process for volunteer signups and so forth. I didn't see anything for where the residents volunteer for, because there's sort of half the equation here. Volunteers, where does someone
Request help.
say it?
How do they request help?
They go,
So I've actually received some word right now that there's some residents that would be interested. So all we would do pretty much is have a sign up sheet, very simple, address and what you need. That's basically it. And but once we build that volunteer base first, we would then be able to understand how many residents we're able to take. So if we're only getting 15, 20 volunteers, we can't, we're not able to take on 100 residents. So it would be kind of, again, it's just that matchmaking. We're not providing service. The municipality is not providing a service, which is, it's difficult sometimes, but it's more of a community volunteer program because it's the residents helping residents. That's
that sign up sheet would be on the website.
Mm-hmm. So we would, I think Laura, you were mentioning that we could possibly get something out in the paper as well. And that necessarily wouldn't be a sign up sheet that if you're not required to have access to a computer. So if there's our residents or seniors that do not have access to the internet or a computer, they can give me a call and give me their information. I can I've already kind of plotted in some locations on the map. So
Promote both very heavily, both the volunteer aspect and the signups for people who need it. And again, there's no vetting for this. It is intended for seniors who can't do it, can't afford it, or other people who may be homebound or have other hardships, but nobody's going to go out and check. So it's kind of on the honor system that people are using it and really don't have other options. And historically, both from the school district and I also talked to Vermont, we can probably expect more people in need than we will be able to meet. But we will do our best and just keep building it.
When I helped with neighborhood aid, as you all know, and that was a lot of neighbors helping neighbors and connecting neighbors. And we got a large number of volunteers, fortunately, through all the promoting that you did in that program. And I found that it was really helpful to have a training. I don't necessarily think that you would need a training like this kind of training, but a couple of documents to kind of explain how exactly those volunteers should operate. I'm thinking things like, before you come over, give a phone call or a text to let them know you're coming. And that, what kind of window you'll be showing up or things like that.
yeah, absolutely. In that sign up sheet for the volunteer, we were thinking about it, jotting down their availability, because if let's say they're preoccupied Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and their availabilities are in the evenings. So we can let that resident know once we make that connection, that expect them in the evening. Or maybe possibly before work. It's difficult to tell, but we're going to get that information prior to, and then let the resident know so they can have an expectation of what to expect when snow is falling. So, but really it's more of convenience. This isn't when the snow's on the ground, it needs to be shoveled immediately. It's when that volunteer can. So that's going to be an expectation on both ends. It's convenience and availability, not necessarily snow's on the ground. they need to do
Yeah,
everything.
that'll be a key piece, I think, too.
And that was a luxury that we had during the pandemic is the
Yeah.
weather wasn't bad all the time and
Right.
people had free time because they didn't
Yeah.
have work necessarily. So
Different.
this can be a little trickier, but.
Mhm.
I am very curious about, I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Grillo.
Well, I was just gonna say, so Keith, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the rule is that residents have to clear sidewalks within 24 hours of a snowfall of 1 inch or more. So how do we handle the immediacy of the need for some of the older residents who may not be able to clear their sidewalks in that time period?
Well, and again, the police department enforces that ordinance. Typically, we will issue a warning notice first before any type of I'll say monetary violation notice. So again, we've taken a pretty, I'll say, common sense approach to this. If we encounter a resident, we've had a couple last year. I dealt directly with a couple situations where there was a special situation or circumstance in place. We will reach out to see what other opportunities for availability there is to have someone assist that particular resident with snow removal. And that would be sort of over and above what we can handle here. And that's typically, to be honest with you, Commissioner Grillo, that's really more related to sidewalks, obviously, than it is for private driveways.
Right, and just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we go around, citing people who physically can't clear their sidewalks. I'm suggesting that if we're going to do this program right, we need to make sure that we're dealing with the immediacy of the requests. Because we'll get requests from certainly older folks that live in hilly areas where, it could even be dangerous for them to be clearing their sidewalks.
Sure, and that's a good point. And again, not knowing what our pool of volunteers looks like or the pool of residents who have that need, it's a little difficult to answer what that will look like. This will be a learning experience for all of us, for the municipality, for the volunteers, and for the residents. So again, based on the pool of both that we receive, we'll have to come up with a system or a process to try to be able to address those from a priority standpoint, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think this is but a couple things come to mind for me. One is, just trying to understand the scope of the challenge, right? Volunteers aside, right? It's just a question of, right, where are there residents who have these challenges that we need to be aware of, whether it's from we need to get them help, or we just need to, we don't want to enforce something when these residents can't physically do it. So how do we create a systematic understanding of kind of these challenge areas? But then the other question, Phil, I think is more a question for you, or maybe it's to you ultimately, is I imagine there's a lot of disclaimers on that webpage before requesting help and volunteering to help.
Yeah.
I hope that it's nice and long and it says Mount Lebanon is not, doing this at the top.
We did something like that with the program Mindy described, so that will be.
Yeah, I almost want to suggest this is a completely
Yeah.
branded separate page, right? I mean, you can have a link to it on the municipal website, but it's not a municipal service. And I think we need to be very thoughtful about that. This is a community activity. The municipality is facilitating, but it is a community thing. Therefore, let's,
Your issues are with the community, your neighborhood.
yeah. Yeah,
We had a lot
well,
of these conversations with Neighborhood Aid and, I don't think we've been sued yet. I think that program worked extremely well. And, we
Agreed.
did have a lot of these conversations and, Phil warned us 6 ways from Sundays why we shouldn't do it. But I think this is kind of the same situation. I mean, we don't know until we know, but it's worth doing and it's worth doing yesterday, right? So I think, I'm less concerned where it is, having gone through Neighborhood Aid, but I do think the sooner we get it up, the sooner we can populate the list of residents who know they're going to need help and the list of volunteers who are offering to help. I think we did have a process and we had some meetings, although We also allocated staff for neighborhood aid, which made it a little bit more immediate in terms of picking up phone calls. But we also had a service to take messages and put that into a sheet through, I think we used Twilio at the time. So I'm not suggesting that we do that here, but I do like the idea of setting up a process ahead of time to kind of set up maybe a understanding of how quickly we'll get to the calls or, check messages, that kind of thing.
Is this something that at some point the Community Relations Board would be participating in, right? It just came across my mind.
Good idea.
I mean, part of our education plan every year is to get neighbors to do this, so we don't even need this. I mean, we ask you to look around, look at your neighbors. If you know your neighbor is having chemo, has a brand new baby, or is older, had a knee replacement, get out there and do it. Just be a good neighbor.
That's how our neighborhood works.
The hope is that cut down the number of people that will need
Right,
this.
yeah. So did you guys already know the high school changed the community service requirements for National Honor Society?
10 hours.
5 and 5 in school and 5 out of school. Now it's just
10 all day.
general hours. So that's a lot easier, I think, for the students because they wanted to kind of encourage.
Shovel snow for 10 hours.
Exactly.
That's a concern. I am worried that they will go in and say, okay, that's my day. I've got my 10 hours in.
So yeah, so that's my big question. So who's gonna sign their community service forms? You don't have to answer this right now, but I think it's totally reasonable for the resident who received the service to be the one that's signing off. I don't think you wanna have 500 or 200 kids coming to you with forms in, I worked 0.25 hours here and, whatever, 10 minutes here. And then the other one is the high school ages. High school starts or most kids are 14 when they start. So I was wondering why you had to be 15 to do this.
That was actually just a number I pulled from the Pittsburgh website and from a fellow Snow Angel program.
Oh, yeah, I'd encourage it to go way lower. Like
Yeah,
a 10-year-old
absolutely.
could do it.
It could be, I think it was 15.
Let's do it.
It was 15 years old to not be accompanied by a guardian. And I think if you're below 15, you must be accompanied by a guardian.
Right now, 14-year-olds are doing community service all the time and
We can
working
abs-
with a permit. Yeah,
We can make that change.
Check that off the solicitor.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think if you want to broaden that pool, you're gonna miss all the freshmen if you start at 15 or some of them. at least.
And I
We've
think
got-
going,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Good.
I think to kind of add to your point as well with the community service, that is obviously a benefit and a factor of this, but I think one other point we would like to kind of stress a little bit that this is a winter long commitment rather than community service hours, because as you can see, we've gotten snow already and it'll be December, January, February, possibly even March. And 10 hours could be filled in a weekend. So it's something that we would like to kind of, it's a commitment rather than just a requirement of what you need. So that's another thing that we kind of stress a little bit further and put the word out to the community as well, that it's some people, like Laura was saying before, some people are already doing this. They just aren't obviously registered to do this, but I think that's what it's better to have is a commitment to your neighbor and things like that. But
I think the comment I made at the ESB was, where is the leaf angels and the mulch angels?
Just real quick on the community service, I think when we looked at the ERUs for the stormwater fee, we had assumed a certain, number of ERUs. We looked at a certain number of impervious space, and I think things like driveways and just impervious space on houses in general came within like, the 90th percentile. They were all pretty similar. We had some that were smaller and we had some that were bigger. So I wonder whether we could just put a number here, like every driveway is going to be a half hour, that kind of thing, and just assume that if we're validating in some way that there is a match between a student and a resident, you get a half hour for every driveway and, boom, you're done. We don't have to.
Yeah, we are only doing sidewalks with this program. Unfortunately, the driveways, that's just too much.
Don't do my deck.
we've talked about that as well, that there's obviously some obligations that people may be willing to do as well. If you have a small driveway, you'd be willing to do it, but we're primarily looking at walkways, sidewalks that
For
are
the community.
for the community. Again, that kind of roots back to the entire community-based walkability program. So it's not just benefiting the resident, it's benefiting people who utilize that sidewalk daily.
I think we could probably get away with some formula that says, every house is X number of minutes so that we don't have to kind of split hairs and worry about residents or even municipalities signing, you did 9 minutes here, 12 minutes there. But still get the kids time that they need toward their community service.
You'll look into the parameters and do you need to bring this back to us or what happens now?
I think they actually just wanted to move the program forward as long as the commission supported because of the timing here. We need to sort
We're
of.
already getting calls.
sort of
Yeah. And I called her Becca. It's Brittany. I'm apologize. Just back. It's Brittany. Yeah, they're already getting calls. So.
Okay, I am a little skeptical, but I'll go ahead and give it my blessing. Good luck and let us know if you want to as a pilot, give it a try.
Absolutely. And I think just kind of looking as a, planning out our timeline here, it's the first week, we'd like to get something out the first week of December to get our volunteers.
Okay.
See what we we're able to get. And I'm kind of staying optimistic. I think one is better than none. As long as we're able to get one volunteer this year, we can, as Keith mentioned, it's a learning process and we're going to be adapting and changing and things like that, hopefully growing our base of how many people we're able to get. So this turns into a community-based program solely, not even having to base on, or not even having to rely on the municipality at all. So it's a possibility.
Yeah.
I see our junior commissioner here, so I'm sure that will be a discussion point.
It looks like you put this in there, but I think without, being able to walk, being in a close proximity, at least if you're targeting those teenagers, the high schoolers, that would be an essential component.
The hope is that at some point we may be able to just input these things into GIS and then we can pull up the neighborhoods and the matches very easily that way. And then that also may help with the data collection too, because we can tell how much frontage something has of sidewalk. That will help our data.
Data. Awesome. This is fantastic. Thank you guys very much. And looking forward to seeing this thing grow.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, right on, well, actually a little bit ahead of schedule. So we have boards and authorities. Who would like to go first?
The Hedgerow Preservation Board did not have a meeting yesterday, unfortunately, because we couldn't quite reach a quorum, but we were able to have some nice chats and have some productive conversations. So we're not going to be meeting in December as we typically take that month off. It's difficult to get a quorum in the third Monday in the month.
Library has been celebrating their 90th year anniversary, doing well there. And Saturday, I have to say this,
Yes.
did Iceland's flood of books.
Oh,
I
come
can't
on,
pronounce
come on,
it.
say it. I want to hear it. Shalala Book of Flood, I think.
Something like that. I can't say it. Yeah, but they, I was there on the evening that they had the lecture and it looked like the lecture room was pretty well sold out. Everybody was happy with what was going on and they're moving forward. They've been doing a great job with their sending out pictures, old pictures of the library on Facebook. It's really fun.
Saw that.
Yeah, it's fun. Then Community Relations Board is prioritizing their goals from the DEI study. They're in the process of doing that.
Great.
Yeah. And EO hasn't met.
Bert says due to vote on their budget tomorrow night, so stay tuned for that.
Commissioner Grella?
Thank you. Yeah, school board is starting the process for hiring on superintendent and assistant superintendent. The teacher contract will be up for negotiation this coming year, and December meeting is the reorg meeting for leadership of the school board. So that'll be going on, I think, at the next meeting. Yeah, and then just a comment on after Ann on the library. The library event was fantastic. Super well attended, just a lot of fun, saw young and old there, just really cool event. And I think Robin is on Zoom. We chatted with staff for a little bit downstairs. Just a great event. It sounds like they did pretty well too.
Fantastic. All right, for me, Environmental Sustainability Board met. They are with the topics on hand today, talking about the sidewalk expansion policy. One of the ESB members raised it as an area of interest that they would like to see changes to it. So it's started a discussion around how do we
think about the expansion policy and encourage people to fill those gaps. So discussions are happening there. It's actually kind of spread to a whole group of residents who are interested. To kind of think about how do we understand, expand, supporting the expansion of sidewalks. So it's going to be an evolutionary process, but they're building momentum. I'm trying to help them through that process as much as possible. Connect is very busy right now. Connect is looking at moving potentially from PIT to a fiscal sponsor called CFA. It's the Community Foundation of the Alleghenies. So moving out of the PIT organization for a variety of reasons, but they think it's really time as an organization to move out of the kind of the PIT umbrella. It would provide opportunities to engage other universities, and a lot of other experts in other kind of regional governance focus areas. So that's an ongoing process. So the executive committee and the board are looking at kind of this whole process in terms of kind of who is Connect, what are we doing, what is our strategic purpose, and then what are the fiscal ramifications of a shift. It seems currently that it's a bit of a wash, which is okay. That's exactly what we hope.
Sure.
So it's really bent down to how do we understand the role of the organization in the region and the impact of a move to a different fiscal sponsor. So lots of conversations are happening in that respect.
Where are their offices?
They're off. We would have to find spaces, but they largely work virtual anyway. They do meet at Posvar now. That's where their offices are, but they would potentially move. They had a meeting at Dormont Rec Center, which I was able to attend, talking about strategic planning. They also had a presentation by GAS, the air quality group, talking about things that local governments can do. They were very excited that we have adopted and installed purple air monitors. They actually gave one away to a different municipality that didn't have any yet. So they were really excited that we are already on that path. They gave us a whole I know, go us, talking about air quality and how to mitigate it. So really trying to promote various issues, and helping municipalities move forward. So Connect is very busy. Lots to talk about, but I will leave it at that.
Great.
That's all I got. And we've got 5 minutes. Everybody has a small break, and then we can reconvene in commission chambers for our regular meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.